Welcome back to the Dershow. I'm in Israel. I just completed an incredibly wonderful day, a couple of days in Israel. I met with the president of Israel. I met with the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Israel. I met with people from the intelligence services. I met with an old friend who I went to kindergarten with. It's been an incredible, incredible time. I was able to buy my wife an incredible present today. You know, people say, uh, Palestinian leaders say there's no connection between Israel and Judaism. That Zionism is just an invention of the late 19th, early 20th century. So I went to an antiquity shop. I'm a collector of antiquities, and I met a man whose family I've known for years, the Barakat family, prominent Palestinian Arabs. I used to stay at a hotel, which was an Arab hotel in East Jerusalem, and I bought antiquities from his father, and I went in today, and he sold me a little coin that was just remarkable. It's a 2,000-year-old coin, and it says, for the freedom and liberty of Zion. Zion, Zion, Zionism. The Hebrew word is tzion. It comes from the Bible. And the idea that there's no connection between the Jewish people, the current Israeli people, and the land of Israel, which used to be called Judea and Samaria. Only the Romans changed the name when they conquered it in the 6th, 7th century, decade of the first century BC, AD. And they just named it after the Philistines, Goliath, and in order to de-Judaize it, to change the name from Judea to Philistina, Palestine. So I bought that coin for her, and she just loves it. So happy wife, happy life, and I'm so happy that Carolyn really liked the coin I got her. So it's part of a gold, chain that she can wear around her neck. But to wear a 2,000-year-old coin that is about Zionism, is for me and for her a thrill. The man I bought it from comes from a very prominent Palestinian family who I've known since 1970, the Barakat family. And I've spent today predominantly with Palestinian people. And it made me so sad at what is going on in that region. The Palestinian people I know, the Palestinian people I work with, the Palestinian people I met today are among the most wonderful, giving, innovative, nicest people. They want peace. They want for their children what we want for our children. But the failure of Palestinian leadership has been just completely and undermining the Palestinian people. As Abi Ibn once said, the Palestinian leaders don't know how to take yes for an answer. They could have had a state 1937, 1947, 1967, 2000, 2001, 2005, 2007, and even between those times, between 1948, which they called the Nakba, it was a self-inflicted wound, they refused to accept a Palestinian state. Between 48 and 67, Israel didn't rule the West Bank, Judea, Samaria. They didn't rule the Gaza Strip. Egypt ruled the Gaza Strip, and Jordan ruled the West Bank. Palestinians didn't even ask for a state. And if they did, the Jordanians and the Egyptians didn't give it to them. The leader of the Palestinians, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, who was a Nazi war criminal, spent the war years with Hitler in Berlin, said there's no such thing as the Palestinian people. We don't want a state. We just don't want there to be a Jewish state. Bill Clinton said the same thing 100 years later, almost, in which he said Hamas doesn't want a state. They just want there not to be a Jewish state. They just want to kill Jews. But the difference between Zionism and Palestinianism, Zionism is about building a state, creating a state, which Israel did, remaking a language that had been dead for 2,000 years, making swamps into orange groves, having scientific technology, great universities, newspapers, most of which are critical of the Israeli government. Whereas Palestinianism has one goal: to destroy a state. They don't want a Palestinian state. They just want there not to be a Jewish state. When's the last time you heard a college demonstration against Israel call for a two-state solution? They don't, because Hamas doesn't want a state. It doesn't want a two-state solution. It will settle for a no-state solution. They don't want Israel to be a state. They don't really care about whether there's a state in Palestine. But their leaders have been fickle and corrupt and self-serving, and it's just been awful for the Palestinian people. Even what's going on in Gaza today, the hunger, is no starvation. I'm going to Gaza. I'm trying my best. I'm getting permission to try to go to Gaza either by helicopter or by armored truck. I want to see for myself. But what I've seen videotapes, and I've seen first-person accounts by honest people. I'm not talking about the New York Times or CNN, talking about honest people. That says, there is no starvation. There's some hunger. As I've said before, they're not getting dessert. Maybe they're not getting an appetizer, but they're getting a rice bowl, they're getting bread, they're getting pita. There have been people who've died, but people die every day in every country. You saw what the New York Times, to its everlasting disgrace, did a few weeks ago. They put a picture on the front page, which was then carried by virtually every major newspaper in the world, of a starving Palestinian child with bones protruding through his body. And they fixed the film because the original film had a picture of an obese mother standing next to him, obviously very well fed, and his brother standing next to him, very well fed, very, very strong looking. And it failed to disclose that this young boy who had his bones protruding has had his bones protruding since the day he was born. He had multiple sclerosis. He wasn't dying of starvation. I don't know whether he was living or dying, but he was suffering from a horrible disease that had nothing to do with Israel. But that's the New York Times, and that's so many other newspapers around the country that have done that. And so I'm going to be meeting with the prime minister. I'm going to tell him what I think. Some of it he'll like, some of it he won't like. That's the way I deal with people. I had a very, very direct conversation with the president of Israel, disagreeing with some things that he was saying and agreeing with other things. Same thing with the chief justice. Same thing with the intelligence services. So when I come to Israel, I don't come to just pat people on the back. I come to say what I think, and I have my own opinions, and I try not to take any position on domestic Israeli politics. So I wanted to do that. I can become a citizen and vote, but I'm not. I'm an American citizen. So I limit my criticism domestically to the United States, to the country I'm a citizen of. But I can be critical of Israeli policies, but I don't take positions on who should be the prime minister and who should be in various positions. I have my opinions, but I try my best not to express them, because I'm not a citizen of Israel, and being Jewish doesn't give you the authority to make decisions for the citizens of Israel. They have some very hard decisions to make. Will they have a ceasefire in exchange for 10 hostages? By the way, they've offered it. And don't listen to me. Listen to the Secretary of State. Listen to the President of the United States. Listen to Steve Witkoff. They'll all tell you that it was Hamas that refused to comply with the deal, refused to agree to the deal, which would have given them everything they wanted. Why did they refuse? Well, Marco Rubio explained why they refused after initially agreeing, because between the time they agreed and the time they refused, something happened. The despicable president of France, Macron, said he would recognize a Palestinian state. They don't have to release the hostages. We'll recognize a Palestinian state. They don't have to put down their arms. We'll recognize a Palestinian state. They don't have to stop murdering Israelis. We'll recognize a Palestinian state. Why should Hamas deal? Why should it sacrifice its bargaining position? Imagine Donald Trump, the great negotiator, having a negotiation and saying, well, I'll tell you what, I'll just give you everything you want, and you don't have to give me anything. It would never happen. But that's what Macron has basically introduced. And his craven attempt to placate the mobs in France. And his domestic constituency has now been copied by Great Britain, by Canada, by Australia, and probably by New Zealand. They are going to have blood on their hands. because as the result of their unilateral recognition, without demanding anything in return, without demanding the release of the hostages, will mean that Hamas is not going to deal. It's not going to release the hostages, and some may die, and these countries will have blood on their hands, and they're going to increase the tensions in the Middle East. They're not going to decrease them. They're going to have virtue posturing, and look at us, we recognize a Palestinian state. Big deal. And they'll speak about a Palestinian state from the same podium at the UN, from which a resolution was enacted 40 years ago. I forget the exact date, equating Zionism with racism. Zionism is the least racist political view imaginable. Israel is a multicultural, multiracial state. It has, black people in positions of great authority, Arab Muslims in positions of great authority. Zionism is not racism. And a couple of years later, they rescinded the resolution. But it's the same podium from which Ahmadinejad denied the Holocaust, from which Yasser Arafat wielded a gun when he spoke at the United Nations. The United Nations General Assembly has become the Der Stürmer, the Nazi propaganda rag of modern times. It was Abiy Ibn who once said that if Algeria introduced a resolution to the General Assembly of the UN saying that the earth is flat and that Israel had flattened it, it would win 126 to 12 with 32 abstentions. And he could name the states that would vote for it. Against it would be Israel and the United States and a couple of islands in the Pacific. Abstentions would be the courageous states of France and England and Canada and Australia and New Zealand, and the rest of the world would vote that the world was flat if Algeria introduced the resolution, or if the Palestinians introduced the resolution. So don't expect justice or honesty or truth from the UN any more than you expect it from the New York Times and from CNN. It's not going to happen. And so, my visit to Israel it's just reinforced my views. Maybe I'll change some of my views. If I get to Gaza, maybe there'll be some opportunity to interact and to change views. But I interact with Palestinian people all the time. I've had dinner, just four of us, with Mohammed Abbas, the head of the Palestinian Authority. I've had dinner with the former prime minister of the Palestinian Authority. I've had dinner with Saeb Erekat, the spokesman for the Palestinian Authority, and many other people. So, I speak to people like that. I'm better than the pierogi guy on the vineyard who won't sell me pierogies because I'm a Zionist. I'm a Zionist, but I speak to non-Zionists. Unlike, again, some people on Martha's Vineyard who won't speak to me because I'm a Zionist. I believe in dialogue. I believe in speaking to anybody. I've represented Nazis and communists. I've represented Palestinians who wanted to honor Yasser Arafat. Free speech to me is crucially important, and I'm going to continue to defend free speech, and people will criticize me for it. But that's what the Constitution demands, and that's what I love about America. Its Constitution, its system of checks and balances, its separation of powers. That's what makes America the greatest country in the world. And Israel is very, very similar. It doesn't have a written constitution, but it has the best civil liberties record, of course, of any country in the Middle East, and one of the best civil liberties and human rights records of any country in the world. It also, and this is going to surprise people, has the best record, not the second best, the best record of killing fewest civilians compared to combatants of any country in the modern history of warfare. That's right. The ratio of combatants to non-combatants that are killed is better in Israel than it is in the United States, than it is in NATO, than it is in Britain, than it is in France, than it is in Canada, than it is in any country that's fought comparable wars, such as the wars we fought in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places. In Israel, the ratio at worst is 2.5 to 1, less than 3, even by Hamas figures, civilians to every combatant killed. The usual ratio is 7 to 1. Sometimes it's 10 or 12 to 1. At Hiroshima, it was 1,000 to 1. At Dresden, it was hundreds to 1. In Tokyo, it was thousands to 1. and in other wars as well. So Israel has the best record of any country in the world of minimizing civilian deaths, despite the fact that Hamas hides its terrorists among civilians and doesn't allow its civilians to use its tunnels. Tunnels are the best possible shelters, and they reserve those shelters only for terrorist fighters. They will not allow a baby into the shelter. They will not allow a woman into the shelter. So don't blame Israel. When you see dead babies and you see dead women, that's Hamas's fault. And that's the New York Times' fault for not telling that story, for putting on the front page of the New York Times a faked picture of a child who tragically has a serious illness and trying to persuade the world that Israel is starving him. It's a blood libel. It's defamation. And I wish there were a way of bringing a lawsuit against the New York Times for defamation under American law. Unfortunately, a country doesn't have standing to sue a journal. In some countries they do, and maybe there'll be a way to find some countries in the world that would have an opportunity to bring a lawsuit for defamation against the New York Times and against other people who have defamed. Let me tell you one more thing. I went out of my way during my time here in Israel to make a deep dive into Tucker Carlson's false claim that somehow Jeffrey Epstein must have worked for the Mossad or for Israeli intelligence. I can tell you categorically with 100% certainty, 100, not 99, 100% certainty, based on objective, clear evidence that Jeffrey Epstein never had any association with any Israeli intelligence agency. Now, somebody came up with a smoking gun. The other day, somebody came up with a smoking gun. They actually found a photograph of Jeffrey Epstein wearing an IDF, Israel Defense Forces t-shirt. Wow, that proves he's a part of the IDF. You know where he got that t-shirt? I bought it for him for $7 in the Shuk about 25 or more years ago, more actually. He came to Israel for one day. I was in Israel writing a book. Came to Israel for one day. He had never been there before. I don't think he ever came again. He didn't stay overnight. He asked me to organize a lunch with some smart people. He loved to collect smart people. I did. And then he said, can we walk in the Shuk, the market? And we did. And he saw this IDF shirt and he loved it. It's very nice looking army colored shirt. I said, all right, let me buy it for you. And I bought it for him and he put it on. People took pictures. And that's the evidence that he worked for the Mossad. Wow. I can tell you this, that nobody who makes that claim would ever work for the Mossad because the Mossad wouldn't hire jerks like that. So no, he didn't work for the Mossad. He didn't work for Israeli intelligence. He didn't work for the military. I don't think he worked for British intelligence or U.S. intelligence. But the only thing I can tell you categorically, is he did not work for Israeli intelligence. I know that for a fact. And if you don't believe it, let me tell you another fact. I was a lawyer for the Mossad. I represented them back, 25, 30 years ago when 5 members of the Mossad were captured in Cyprus on the charge that they were working together with the Turkish government. Of course, Israel and Turkey doesn't get along anymore, but in those days they did. And we were able to disprove that, and we freed them, and I got a nice letter from the head of the Mossad thanking me. So without disclosing names or particulars, I can tell you I have very, very good access to Israeli intelligence. And again, categorically, I can tell you that there is absolutely no truth to the conspiracy theory that somehow Jeffrey Epstein worked for the Mossad. First of all, the Mossad doesn't recruit Americans. After the disaster of the Pollard case, where Pollard, walked into a CIA office and or an Israeli office, I'm sure, and he was an American, and he did give Israel some information. That was a disaster. It resulted in terrible breach between Israel and the United States, and it resulted in Pollard getting many years in prison. Since that time, Israel has had an unbroken policy of never recruiting or accepting information from an American. So they would never, under any circumstances, have accepted information from Jeffrey Epstein. And Jeffrey Epstein, you're going to accept information from him, of all people? Come on. It's absurd. And anybody who states that is either being a fool or a knave, or both, because there's just no truth to it. So, big day tomorrow. I'm going to be, as I said, seeing some of the most important people in Israel. I'm going to have briefings from the military. I'm going to learn more about what happened with the American and Israeli bombing of Iran. I'm going to learn more about the hostage negotiations. And to the extent I'm able to, I will report back to you. I obviously, if I'm told that I can't report certain things, I won't be able to. Thus far, I haven't been told that. I've been able to report anything I've been told, and I've asked all the time because I don't want to compromise ongoing operations or intelligence or anything of the kind. So just one more thing. Whenever I go to Israel, and many other times I wear this wonderful little pendant, which I bought some years ago. This was given out to everybody who attended the first Zionist conference that was held in Russia in 1917, when before 1917, the Tsar wouldn't allow Zionism in Russia. But when the communists took over, ironically, because they became so anti-Zionist, they allowed a Zionist conference. And so this was from the first Zionist conference more than 100 years ago. And people who tell you that Zionism is just a new political phenomenon fail to understand its deep roots in the Bible, its deep roots in history, its deep roots in antiquity. And I collect, whether it be a coin from 2,000 years ago or a 1917 pendant. I like to hold on to material things. I like to have in my hand a letter written by George Washington, a letter written by Thomas Jefferson, a letter written by Theodore Herzl, a letter written by David Ben-Gurion, a letter written by Jabotinsky, a letter written by the founding fathers of Israel, as well as the founding fathers of the United States. You know, I've mentioned before that one of my pet projects as I approach 87 is to write a book called Founding Fathers and One Jewish Mother. And it would be about similarities between the founding fathers of the United States and the founding fathers of Israel, with one Jewish mother, Golda Meir. There were no women involved directly in the founding of America, although, of course, Adams's wife played a pretty significant role in many of Adams's decisions. But I'm looking forward to trying to get the time to write that book and a few other books that I want to write before my pen dries up. So big day tomorrow. Got to go to sleep, get some sleep. And we're 7 hours ahead. So I'm not getting as much sleep as I'd like to get, but I want to keep reporting to you. So I hope I will be able to report tomorrow. It really depends a little bit on who I'm meeting with, what time the meetings are over. But I look forward to speaking to you tomorrow if I can. If not, next week I'll be back. So you'll hear a full report of my time in Israel. I have to tell you, the food here is absolutely sensational. I've had the most wonderful Arab meal today on the Mount of Olives, overlooking the old city, overlooking the Golden Dome, overlooking the Al-Aqsa Mosque, overlooking the Western Wall. And again, when I see things like that, I say to myself, if only the Israeli people and the Palestinian people could get together, it would be so wonderful, because they have so much in common, and together they could really, really turn their spears into plowshares and their nuclear weapons into nuclear medicine. And so I am hopeful. I can't say I'm optimistic, but I'm hopeful that maybe some kind of peace can be achieved, but it can only be achieved if Hamas is disarmed, destroyed, disabled, because Hamas is the biggest barrier to peace, because it doesn't want a Palestinian state or an Israeli state. It wants constant warfare. It wants death and destruction. Bill Clinton said that. Bill Clinton said they don't want a Palestinian state. They just want to kill Jews. And that's what they're doing. And so we can't let them do that. The world demands better. And so I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.